The lights of Kepler Station flickered against the darkness of space. Ships came and went like metal birds, carrying traders and travelers from 100 different worlds. Inside the massive structure, the air hummed with voices speaking in dozens of languages. Aliens of every shape and size walked through the wide corridors, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Tae-Min sat in the security office, watching the screens that showed every corner of the station. He had been working here for 3 years, and he thought he had seen everything. Blue-skinned merchants from the Outer Rim, 6-armed engineers from the Crystal Worlds, even the scary-looking warriors from the War Planets. But nothing had prepared him for the white shadow that moved through his station like a ghost. The creature appeared on screen 7, walking slowly through the main marketplace. Taemin leaned forward in his chair. The being looked like a fox that had learned to walk on 2 legs. Its fur was pure white, whiter than fresh snow. Its eyes glowed red like burning coals. Every step it took was silent, smooth, and deadly. Around the white fox, the busy marketplace began to change. Vendors who had been calling out their prices suddenly went quiet. Customers who had been haggling over goods stopped talking. They all began to move away from the creature. Some backed away slowly, keeping their eyes on the fox. Others turned and walked quickly in the other direction. Within minutes, a wide circle had formed around the white fox. It walked alone. Through the center of the marketplace, while hundreds of beings pressed themselves against the walls and shop fronts, the silence was so complete that Taemin could hear his own heartbeat through the security microphones. "There he goes again," said Captain Janae, entering the security office. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight knot. "How long has he been on the station this time?" 3 days, Taemin replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Same pattern as always. He shows up, buys some food, stays in the lower levels, and everyone acts like he is death itself." Janae watched the screen as the white fox stopped. At a food vendor, the alien running the stall was a large purple creature with 4 arms. When the fox approached, the vendor quickly grabbed a package of dried meat and placed it on the counter. The fox left some credits next to the package and picked up the food. No words were spoken between them. "Do you know what they call him?" Janae asked. Tae-Min shook his head. "Biko," she said. "It means white tiger in an old Earth language. Though he looks more like a fox to me. Why do they all fear him so much? I mean, he is big, and he looks dangerous, but half the beings on this station could probably take him in a fight." Janae was quiet for a moment. "You have not heard the stories?" she said finally. "They say he has killed over 30 beings in fighting rings across the galaxy. They say he moves like lightning and strikes like thunder. Some claim he can disappear into shadows even though his fur is white as starlight." On the screen, Biko had finished his business at the food stall, turned and walked toward the exit that led to the lower levels of the station. The crowd remained pressed against the walls until he was completely gone. Only then did the normal sounds of the marketplace return. "There is something else," Janae continued. "His own people threw him out. The Vulpines are fox-like beings from the forest moon of Kairos. They are known for being clever and quick, but they are also very focused on being perfect. An albino, like Biko, would be seen as cursed. Bad luck. They probably forced him to leave when he was very young." Taemin felt a small stab of pity. "So he has been alone all this time." "Alone and angry," Janae said. "That is a dangerous combination." In the lower levels of the station, far from the busy marketplace, another human was working. Hansel knelt beside a large machine that cleaned the air for the entire station. He had been an engineer for most of his adult life, and he loved the feeling of fixing things that were broken. The work was peaceful, and it gave him time to think. Hansel was the only human on Kepler Station. He had requested the job because he wanted to see the galaxy and meet new kinds of people. But after 2 years of working here, he had learned that being different was not always easy. The other species were polite to him, but they kept their distance. They saw him as strange and unpredictable as he worked on the air machine. Hansel heard a soft sound in the maintenance tunnel above him. He looked up but saw nothing. The sound came again, like cloth brushing against metal. Hansel had heard that sound before. Someone was moving through the tunnels. someone who did not want to be seen. He had glimpsed the white figure several times over the past few months. Always in the lower levels, always moving through the maintenance areas where few beings ever went. Hansel had never gotten a clear look at the creature, but he had heard the stories. Everyone on the station knew about the albino fox who brought fear wherever he went, but Hansel felt no fear. He was curious more than anything else. Why did the creature spend so much time in the lower levels? What was he doing down here in the dark, mechanical spaces of the station? The sound in the tunnel stopped. Hansel went back to his work, but part of his mind remained focused on the mystery above him. He'd always been the kind of person who wanted to understand things. And right now, the white fox was the biggest mystery on Kepler Station, 3 levels above. Biko moved through the maintenance tunnels like a ghost. His white fur should have made him easy to spot, but he had learned long ago how to use shadows and darkness to hide himself. The tunnels were his kingdom, the only place on the station where he could move freely without. Causing panic, he had been listening to the human work for several minutes. The being called Hansel was always talking to himself while he worked, sometimes in the human language and sometimes in the common tongue used for trade. Biko found the sound strangely comforting. It reminded him of better times, when he had lived among his own people and listened to the gentle sounds of daily life, but those days were long gone.
Wow.
He was the white shadow, the cursed one, the killer that mothers used to frighten their children. He had not chosen this life, but it was the only one he had left. Biko settled into a comfortable position in the tunnel and listened to the human work below. He could pretend that he was not alone in the universe, that somewhere, someone was simply living their life without fear or hatred or violence. It was a small comfort, but it was all he had. The station continued its slow rotation around the distant star. Ships came and went. Traders made their deals. And in the depths of the mechanical levels, a lonely human worked while an albino
X.
listened from the shadows above. Neither of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. The warning lights in the docking bay flashed red as the Thraxian ship landed with a heavy thud. Steam rose from its engines, and the metal hull glowed with heat from traveling through space. Taman watched from the security office as 6 large figures stepped out of the ship. The Thraxians were reptile-like beings with thick scales that covered their bodies like armor. They stood over 7 feet tall, with long tails that swished behind them as they walked. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and their mouths were filled with sharp teeth. Each one carried weapons that looked like they had seen many battles. "This is not good," Captain Janae said, standing behind Taman. She had been studying the ship's registration data. These are not traders or travelers, they are hunters. The leader of the group was bigger than the others. His scales were darker, almost black, and old scars covered his arms and face. He wore a necklace made of small bones and teeth from creatures he had killed. His name was Vexkul, and he was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most dangerous bounty hunters alive, Captain Taman said. "They are asking for permission to bring their weapons onto the station." Janae shook her head. "Denied. All weapons must be stored in the docking bay." But when the security team approached the Thraxians, Vexkul showed them an official hunting permit. The document was real and legal. It gave them the right to carry weapons while pursuing their target. "Who are they hunting?" Janae asked. Vex-Kul smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "The white fox," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "The one you call Biko. We have been tracking him across 3 systems. He killed my brother on the mining station at Proxima 7. Gina felt her stomach drop. She had hoped that Biko's presence on the station would remain a secret. But somehow word had gotten out. "I cannot allow you to hunt anyone on my station," she said firmly. "You cannot stop us," Vexkul replied. "We have legal rights. The albino fox is a wanted criminal. There is a bounty on his head worth 50,000 credits." The Thraxians spread out through the station, asking questions and showing pictures of Beko to anyone who would listen. Most aliens refused to talk to them, but fear made some of them willing to share information. Soon the hunters knew that the white fox had been seen in the lower levels of the station, deep in the maintenance tunnels, Biko sensed the danger. His nose picked up the scent of the reptilian hunters long before they came close. He had smelled that particular scent before on a dozen different worlds. It was the smell of death and violence. He moved through the tunnels like liquid shadow, staying ahead of the hunters who were searching for him, but Biko knew he could not hide forever. The station was large, but it was not infinite. Eventually they would corner him. Hansel was working in the power distribution center when he heard the commotion above. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, and he could hear voices speaking in the harsh language of the Thraxians. He climbed up to the main level to see what was happening. "Have you seen the white fox?" one of the hunters asked him. Creature towered over Hansel, its yellow eyes staring down at him with barely controlled violence. "I have seen many things," Hansel replied calmly. "What makes you think I would tell you about any of them?" The Thraxian growled and moved closer. "Do not play games with me, human. We know the albino killer is hiding somewhere on this station. If you help us find him, we will pay you well." Hansel looked up at the creature without fear. "I am not interested in your money." The hunter raised his hand as if to strike Hansel, but Captain Janae appeared with 2 security officers. "That is enough," she said. "You have the right to hunt your target, but you do not have the right to threaten my station personnel." The Thraxian backed away, but his eyes remained fixed on Hansel. "The human knows something," he said to Janae. "I can smell it on him." After the hunters left, Janae turned to Hansel. "Do you know where Biko is hiding?" Hansel shrugged. "I work in the lower levels. I see many things that others do not see, but I do not make it my business to report on the movements of beings who are not hurting anyone." "You think he is not hurting anyone?" Janae asked. "The stories about him are not just stories. He has killed many beings," maybe Hansel said. "But I have never seen him hurt anyone on this station. He buys food, he stays out of the way, and he minds his own business. That is more than I can say for these hunters." The confrontation came. 2 hours later in Docking Bay 7, Biko had been trying to reach his small ship, hoping to leave the station before the hunters found him. But Vexkull and his team had been waiting for him. "There is nowhere to run, White Fox," Vexkull called out as the 6 Thraxians surrounded Beko. "You killed my brother. Now you will pay the price." Biko stood in the center of the circle, his red eyes glowing in the dim light of the docking bay. He was smaller than any of the hunters, but there was something in his posture that made him seem dangerous. His muscles were tense, ready to spring into action. "Your brother died with honor," Biko said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "He fought well for someone who had never faced a real opponent before." Vexkull roared in anger and charged forward. The battle began. What happened next would be talked about for years throughout the galaxy. Biko moved like he was made of lightning itself, thought. His white form blurred as he dodged the first attack. Spinning around Vexkull and slashing with claws that seemed to appear from nowhere, the other hunters tried to surround him. But Biko was already gone, leaping over their heads and landing behind them. His movements were so fast that the security cameras could barely track him. He struck like a snake, quick and deadly, then disappeared back into the shadows. One by one, the hunters fell. The first died when Biko's claws opened his throat. The second was killed when the white fox grabbed his weapon and turned it against him. The third and fourth died within seconds of each other, their blood mixing on the metal floor of the docking bay. Vexkull found himself alone, facing the creature that had killed 4 of his best hunters in less than 3 minutes. The albino fox was breathing hard, and there were cuts on his arms and legs, but his red eyes still burned with deadly focus. "You are not the first to hunt me," Biko said, walking slowly toward the Thraxian leader, "and you will not be the last to die for it." The final fight was brutal but brief. Vexkull was a skilled warrior, but he was no match for Biko's speed and fury. When it was over, the white fox stood alone among the bodies of his enemies, his fur stained with their blood. The station alarms were blaring now. Security teams were running toward the docking bay. Biko looked around at the carnage he had created, then up at the security cameras that had recorded everything in the security office. Taman and Janae watched in shocked silence as the white fox simply walked to the ventilation grate and disappeared into the darkness. By the time the security teams reached the docking bay, there was nothing left but bodies and blood. "Send a message to all ships," Janae said quietly. "No more. Hunters are allowed on this station," and put out a station-wide alert. Nobody goes into the lower levels alone. The legend of the White Fox had just grown larger. But somewhere in the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, Hansel was asking himself a different question. If Biko was really the monster everyone said he was, why did he look so sad when he killed those hunters? The answer to that question would change everything. The days after the fight in Docking Bay 7 were different on Kepler Station. People walked faster through the corridors. They spoke in whispers when they thought no one was listening. The lower levels, which had always been quiet, now felt completely empty except for the essential workers, who had no choice but to go there. Hundash Sol continued his work as if nothing had changed. He fixed the machines that kept the station running, checked the systems that provided clean air and water, and maintained the power generators that gave light to thousands of beings. But his mind kept returning to what he had seen on the security footage. Captain Guinea had shown him the recording of the fight. Hansal had watched as Biko moved like a white ghost among the hunters, striking with deadly precision. But what stayed with him was not the violence. It was the look in the fox's eyes after the battle was over. There had been no joy in killing, no satisfaction in victory, only a deep, endless sadness. He does not want to be a killer, Hansel said to himself, as he worked on a water recycling unit. He has to be. The thought would not leave him alone. Hansel had seen many fighters in his life. Some enjoyed the violence. Others did it for money or fame. But Biko seemed to fight only because he had no other choice. The White Fox was trapped in a life he had never wanted. That evening, Hansel made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew him. He went to the food dispensary and bought a package of dried meat. It was the same kind he had seen Biko purchase from the vendor in the marketplace. Then he walked down to the maintenance tunnel where he had first heard the mysterious sounds. He placed the package on the floor near the entrance to the tunnel and stepped back. "I know you were up there," he said, in a normal voice. "I do not." "No, if you are hungry, but I thought you might like this." Hansel waited for a few minutes, but nothing happened. He had not really expected the White Fox to appear. Trust was something that had to be built slowly, especially with someone who had been hunted and hated for so long. The next day, the package was gone. Hansel smiled as he began his work. It was a small victory, but it felt important. He had made contact with the most feared being on the station, and neither of them had been hurt. The following evening, he left another package. This time, he also brought a small portable light and set it on the floor. "I thought you might be tired of sitting in the dark," he said to the empty tunnel. "The light will run for about 6 hours." Again, he waited. Again, nothing happened. But the next morning, both the food and the light were gone. This became Hansal's routine. Every evening after work, he would come to the maintenance tunnel with food and sometimes other small gifts. A battery-powered radio that could pick up music from across the galaxy. A soft blanket that would make sleeping on metal floors more comfortable. A book written in the common trade language that told stories from different worlds. He began to talk while he left these gifts. At first, he spoke about simple things. The weather outside the station, the work he was doing, the ships that came and went. But gradually, he started sharing more personal thoughts. "I have been thinking about loneliness," he said one evening, as he placed a package of fruit near the tunnel entrance. "I used to think that being alone meant being free, no one to answer to, no one to disappoint. But I have learned that freedom, without friendship, is just another kind of prison." Hansel sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. "I chose to come to this station because I wanted to meet new kinds of people. But most of the beings here see me as strange. They are polite, but they keep their distance. I think they are afraid that humans are unpredictable." He laughed softly. "Maybe they are right. After all, what kind of human tries to make friends with the most dangerous creature on the station?" High above, in the darkness of the tunnel, Biko listened to every word. He had been coming to this spot every evening for a week now, drawn by the human's strange kindness. The food was welcome, but the talking was even more valuable. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him as if he were a person instead of a monster. The white fox found himself looking forward to these one-sided conversations. The human's voice was calm and gentle, very different from the harsh words. In angry shouts he usually heard, Hansel spoke about his home planet, about the blue skies and green forests of Earth. He talked about his family, who worried about him working so far from home. He shared his dreams of someday building machines that could help people instead of just maintaining the ones that already existed. But it was the human's questions that affected Biko the most. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if things had been different? Hansel asked one night. If you had been born with normal colored fur, would you still be living with your people? Would you have had a family of your own? Biko closed his eyes and remembered the forest moon where he had been born. He remembered the sound of wind through the trees and the laughter of fox cubs playing in the sunshine. He remembered his mother's voice singing ancient songs, and his father teaching him to read the old writings of their people. All of that was gone now. It was destroyed by the fear and hatred that his white fur had brought into the world. But for these few minutes each evening, listening to the human's gentle voice, he could almost pretend that he was still the scholar and artist he had once dreamed of being. 3 weeks after the first package of food had been left, Hansel was working on a broken air filtration system in the deepest part of the station. It was late at night, and the corridors were empty. He was concentrating on a complex repair when he heard a sound that made him freeze. Footsteps, soft and careful, but definitely footsteps. And they were coming from behind him. Han-Sol slowly turned around, and his breath caught in his throat. Standing in the dim light of the corridor was Biko. The white fox was even more impressive in person than he had been on the security footage. His fur was pure white, almost glowing in the artificial light. His red eyes watched Hansel with intelligence and wariness. But there was something wrong. The fox was favoring his left side, and Hansel could see dark stains on his white fur. Blood. The injuries from the fight with the hunters had not healed properly. You were hurt, Hansel said softly, making no sudden movements. Biko said nothing, but his eyes never left the human's face. He was studying Hansel, trying to decide if this strange being who had been leaving gifts and talking too empty tunnels could be trusted. Han-Sol reached slowly into his toolkit and pulled out a small medical scanner. I have some basic medical supplies, he said. I am not a doctor, but I know how to treat wounds. The white fox still did not speak, but he also did not run away. I know you understand me, Hansel continued. I know you have been listening to me talk for weeks. I do not want to hurt you. I just want to help. For a long moment, the two beings stared at each other in the empty corridor. A human who had chosen compassion over fear. A fox who had forgotten what kindness looked like. Then Biko took a single step forward. It was the first step toward a friendship that would change both of their lives forever. But neither of them knew that yet. All they knew was that for the first time in years, neither of them felt completely alone. Han-Sol held out his hand, palm up, in the universal gesture of peace. My name is Hansel, he said quietly. What is yours? The white fox opened his mouth to speak, but before any words could come out, his legs gave way beneath him. The infection and blood loss that he had been fighting for weeks finally won. Biko collapsed to the metal floor, unconscious. Hansel knelt beside the fallen fox, his mind racing. He had a choice to make. He could call for help, which would mean turning Biko over to station security, or he could try to save the white fox himself. It was not really a choice at all. Do not worry, Hansel whispered as he began to check Biko's injuries. I am going to help you. I promise. The most dangerous moment in both their lives had just become the beginning of something beautiful. Hansel dragged the unconscious Biko through the empty corridors of the lower levels. The white fox was heavier than he looked, and his body was burning with fever. Hansel had to stop several times to rest, but he never considered giving up. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. Getting to his quarters without being seen was not easy. Hansel had to use his engineering access codes to disable security cameras along the route. He also had to avoid the regular patrols that walked through the station at night. But his years of working in the maintenance areas had taught him all the hidden paths and forgotten corridors. His quarters were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a small kitchen area, and a bathroom. It was not much, but it was private. More importantly, it was off the main security grid. The cameras here only recorded when someone triggered the door alarm. And Hansol knew how to disable that system. He laid Biko on the bed and began to examine his injuries. The wounds from the fight with the hunters were infected and had reopened. There were also older injuries that had never healed properly. Scars covered the white fox's body, telling the story of a lifetime of violence and pain. Hansol worked through the night, cleaning wounds and applying medical gel from his emergency supplies, gave Biko antibiotics and pain medication, then covered him with warm blankets. The fever was high, and the fox's breathing was shallow. For several hours, Hansol was not sure if his patient would survive, but as the morning came, Biko's breathing became stronger. The fever began to break, and some color returned to his pale nose. Hansel sat in a chair next to the bed, watching for any sign of improvement. On the second day, Biko began to stir. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked around the unfamiliar room with confusion. When he saw Hansol sitting nearby, he tried to sit up quickly, but pain shot through his body, and he fell back onto the bed. "Easy, Hansol," said softly. "You are safe. You are in my quarters. No one knows you are here." Gah. Biko stared at the human for a long moment. His red eyes were still bright with fever, but there was intelligence in them. "Why?" he asked. The voice was rough from days of not speaking. "Why what?" Hansol replied. "Why did you help me? You could have called security, could have collected the bounty on my head. Why did you risk your life to save mine?" Hansol considered the question. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "And because I think there is more to you than the stories say." Biko closed his eyes. "You are wrong. I am exactly what they say I am, a killer, a monster, someone who brings death wherever he goes."
Ow.
Then, why do you look so sad every time you kill someone? The question caught Biko off guard. "What do you mean?" "I saw the security footage of your fight with the hunters. You moved like a warrior, but your eyes looked like those of someone who was dying inside. That is not the look of a monster. That is the look of someone who hates what he has become." Biko turned his head away. "You do not know what you were talking about?" "Maybe not," Hansol said. "But I know what I see. I see someone who is tired of being afraid, someone who is tired of being alone." Over the next few days, as Biko slowly recovered, Hansol learned more about the white fox's past. During moments when the fever made him delirious, Biko spoke in his native language. He talked about his homeworld, about the family that had rejected him.
About the dreams he had given up long ago.
Hansol used the station's translation system to understand some of what Biko was saying. The white fox had not always been a fighter. He had been a scholar, someone who studied the old writings and created beautiful art. But his albino appearance had made him an outcast. And eventually, he had been forced to leave his people and find his own way in the galaxy. "I wanted to be a teacher," Biko said one evening when he was feeling stronger. "I wanted to help young foxes learn about our history and culture. But they were afraid to let their children near me. They said I would bring bad luck." "So you became a fighter instead," Hansol said. "I became a fighter because I had to eat," Biko replied. "And because fighting was the only thing that my appearance was good for. People see white fur and red eyes. They think of death and demons. So I gave them what they expected. But that is not who you really are." Biko looked at Hansol with tired eyes. "After 20 years of being what people expect you to be, does it matter who you really are?" Hansol leaned forward in his chair. "Yes, it matters to me." As Biko grew stronger, he began to help Hansol with small tasks around the quarters. He fixed a broken communicator that had been sitting on the desk for months. He repaired a food processor that had stopped working properly. His hands were gentle and skilled, very different from the deadly weapons they became during battle. "You are good at this," Hansol said, watching Biko work on a complicated piece of equipment. My people are naturally skilled with technology, Biko replied. We have always been builders and creators. It is only in the last few generations that some of us have become fighters. What would you do if you could choose any life you wanted? Biko stopped working and stared at the device. In his hands, I would build things. Beautiful things. I would create art that would make people happy instead of afraid. I would teach others to do the same. He set the device down and looked at Hansel. But that is impossible now. Too many people know what I am. Too many people fear me. People can change their minds, Hansel said. If you show them who you really are, they might see past the white fur and red eyes. You are the first person in 20 years who has tried to see past them, Beko said quietly. I do not think there will be others. But Hansel was not convinced. He had seen the gentle way Biko worked with his hands. He had heard the sadness in the fox's voice when he talked about his lost dreams. He had watched him care for a small, injured creature that had wandered into the quarters, nursing it back to health with infinite patience. The white fox was not a monster. He was someone who had been forced to become something he hated in order to survive. And Hansel believed that with time and friendship, Biko could find his way back to who he really was. But first, they had to survive what was coming, because word was spreading through the galaxy that the albino fox was hiding somewhere on Kepler's station. And this time, it was not just bounty hunters who were coming. This time, it was an army. On the 7th day of Biko's recovery, the first ships began to arrive. Hansel watched through the small window in his quarters as vessel after vessel docked at the station. Mercenaries, trophy hunters, revenge seekers, and thrill seekers. All of them had come for the same reason. They wanted to be the one who killed the white fox. I have to leave, Biko said when he saw the ships. My presence here is putting everyone in danger. Where will you go? Hansel asked. It does not matter. I will find another place to hide until they give up and go home. Then what? You will hide again when the next group comes looking for you? Biko did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. There has to be a better way, Hansel said. There has to be a way to end this cycle of violence and fear. There is, Biko said softly, but you will not like it. Hansel looked at his friend's face and saw the terrible resignation there. No. Whatever you are thinking, no. It is the only way. If I surrender myself to them, they will stop hunting me. And they will leave this station in peace. They will kill you. I know. Hansel stood up and walked to the window. Outside, more ships were arriving. The station was filling up with beings who wanted nothing more than to see Biko dead. Hansel was not ready to give up. There had to be another way. What if we fought back? He said suddenly. Biko stared at him. What do you mean? What if we made a stand? What if we showed them that you are not alone anymore? That someone is willing to stand with you? That is madness. You would die maybe, but maybe not. And even if we did die, we would die fighting for something important. We would die proving that friendship is stronger than fear. Biko looked at the human who had saved his life and given him hope. You would really do that for me? I would do that with you, Hansel corrected. Because you are my friend. Friends do not abandon each other. For the first time in 20 years, Biko smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. And we will make our stand together. Neither of them knew if they would survive what was coming, but they knew they would not face it alone. And sometimes, that was enough. The station had never seen anything like it. Ships filled every docking bay, and more waited in space for their turn to land. Beings from 100 different worlds crowded the corridors, all talking about the same thing. The white fox was somewhere, on Kepler station, and whoever found him first would become rich and famous. Captain Janae stood in the main control center, watching the chaos unfold on her screens. The station's population had tripled in just 3 days. Food vendors were running out of supplies. Security systems were overloaded. Fights were breaking out between different groups of hunters, who all claimed the right to kill Beko. Captain Wu, Taman said, approaching her with a worried expression. We are getting reports of weapons being smuggled onto the station. Some of these hunters are not following the rules about storing their equipment in the docking bays. Shanae rubbed her temples. She felt a headache coming on. How many security officers do we have? 23 Taimin replied. And how many hunters are on the station now? Over 300, with more arriving every hour? Janae closed her eyes. The math was simple and terrifying. If even half of the hunters decided to cause trouble, her security force would be completely overwhelmed. If they all started fighting each other, the station could become a war zone. Send a message to the Galactic Council, she said. Tell them we need emergency assistance. And start evacuating all non-essential personnel. But even as she gave the orders, Janae knew it was probably too late. The hunters were not going to wait for official help to arrive. They were going to tear the station apart looking for the White Fox. In the crowded marketplace, the hunters were already organizing themselves into search parties. The largest group was led by a massive insect-like creature named Clictor. His species was known for their ability to track prey across vast distances. He had brought 40 of his best warriors, and they were systematically searching every level of the station. The albino fox is here, Clictor announced to his followers. Our sensors have detected his scent in the lower levels. We will find him, and we will claim the bounty. But Clictor was not the only leader among the hunters. A group of mechanical beings called the Iron Collective had sent their most efficient killing machines. They moved through the station like robots, scanning every room and corridor with cold precision. There were also the Voidwalkers, mysterious beings who could move through solid matter. They searched the hidden spaces between the station's walls, looking for any sign of their prey, the Flame Dancers, who used heat sensors to track body temperatures in the darkness. Each group was convinced that they would be the ones to find Biko first, but they were all wrong. Deep in the maintenance tunnels, Hansel and Biko were preparing for war. They had spent the last 2 days setting traps and creating weapons from the station's own systems. Hansel's knowledge of the station's layout was proving invaluable. He knew every tunnel, every access point, every way to move unseen through the massive structure. The power conduits run through this section, Hansel explained, pointing to a schematic on his portable computer. If we can overload them at the right moment, we can shut down the lights in the entire lower level. Biko studied the diagram. With the eye of a skilled warrior and the emergency lighting, I can disable it from the main control panel. But we will only have about 10 minutes before the backup systems activate. 10 minutes is enough, Biko said. In the darkness. I can move without being seen, and they will not be able to coordinate their attacks. They worked together like a team that had been fighting side by side for years. Hansel's technical skills, combined with Biko's combat experience, created a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts. But both of them knew that their chances of survival were small. Are you afraid? Biko asked, as they finished setting up their defenses. Hansel considered the question. Yes, but not of dying. I am afraid of failing. I am afraid that all of this will be for nothing. It will not be for nothing, Biko said firmly. Even if we lose, we will have shown them that I am not the monster they think I am. We will have shown them that someone was willing to stand with me. And maybe that will be enough to change how they see others like you. Go nodded. Maybe, but right now, I'm just grateful that I do not have to face this alone. The hunters found their first clue on the 4th day. A maintenance worker reported seeing strange modifications to the power systems in the lower levels. Someone had been tampering with the electrical grid, setting up what looked like traps and ambush points. Clictor examined the evidence with his compound eyes. This is not random vandalism. Someone is preparing for battle. The White Fox knows we are coming. The news spread quickly through the hunter groups. Their prey was not going to run. He was going to fight. For some, this was disappointing. They had hoped for an easy kill. But for others, it was exciting. A real battle would make their victory more meaningful. Gather your weapons. Clictor commanded his followers. We go hunting tonight. But the hunters were not the only ones making preparations. Captain Gane had been trying to contact Biko through the station's communication system, hoping to convince him to surrender peacefully. When that failed, she decided to take more direct action. I want every security officer armed and ready, she told Taman. And I want the civilian areas sealed off. Oh, no one goes into the lower levels without my permission? Captain, with respect, we cannot stop them all. There are too many hunters and not enough of us. Janae looked at the screens, showing the crowded corridors of her station. Beings with weapons were moving through the passages like an army preparing for war. And somewhere in the depths of the station, a lonely human and a white fox were getting ready to face them all. Then we will do what we can, she said, and we will hope that it is enough. The battle began at midnight. The hunters moved in too. The lower levels in coordinated groups, using their advanced technology to scan for any sign of life. They expected to find Biko hiding in some dark corner waiting to be discovered. Instead, they found themselves walking into a carefully prepared trap. The lights went out first. The entire lower level was plunged into darkness so complete that even the hunters with night vision were momentarily blinded. In that instant of confusion, Beko struck. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, his white fur somehow invisible. In the blackness, his claws found their targets with deadly precision. 3 hunters fell before anyone even knew he was there. The Iron Collective tried to use their thermal sensors to track him. But Hanzol had prepared for that too. He activated the station's heating system, flooding the area with warm air that made thermal imaging useless. The mechanical beings found themselves as blind as everyone else. He is here, Kliktor shouted, firing his weapon into the darkness. Surround him. But it was impossible to surround something they could not see. Biko struck again, taking down to more hunters before disappearing back into the shadows. The hunters began firing randomly, hoping to hit their target by chance. Instead, they ended up shooting each other. In the chaos, Hansel activated the next phase of their plan. He redirected the station's water supply, flooding certain corridors and forcing the hunters to move through narrow passages where Biko could pick them off one by one. This is impossible, one of the Voidwalkers screamed. How can one creature defeat so many? Because he is not alone, Hansal's voice echoed through the station's communication system. And because you are not fighting a monster, you are fighting someone who has friends. The word hit the hunters like a physical blow. Friends. The idea that the feared albino fox had someone willing to stand with him was something none of them had considered. They had come expecting to hunt a lonely killer. Instead, they found themselves facing a team. The battle raged for hours. The hunters had superior numbers and better weapons, but Hansel and Beko had something more powerful. They had each other, and they had the righteous anger of beings who were fighting for their right to exist. But as the night wore on, it became clear that even their best efforts might not be enough. The hunters were learning to adapt to the darkness and their traps. They were coordinating their attacks better. And most importantly, they were not giving up. We cannot hold them forever, Biko said during a brief break in the fighting. He was breathing hard, and there were new cuts on his white fur. I know, Hansel replied. But we do not have to win. We just have to survive until help arrives. Help. Hansel smiled grimly. I sent a message to the Galactic Council before the fighting started. I told them that a group of illegal hunters was trying to murder an innocent being on a neutral station. They should be here soon. Biko stared at his friend in amazement. You think they will help us? I think they will help justice. And that is what we are fighting for. As if summoned by his words, a new voice echoed through the station's communication system. It was Captain Jin, and she sounded different, stronger, more determined. This is Captain Jin. To all hunters on Kepler Station, you have 30 minutes to return to your ships and leave. Any hunter found carrying weapons after that time will be arrested and charged with terrorism. The hunters looked at each other in confusion. She cannot stop us, Kliktor said. She does not have enough security officers. No, Janae's voice continued. But the 3 Galactic Council ships that just arrived do, and they are authorized to use any force necessary to restore order to this station. Through the station's windows, the hunters could see the massive council ships taking position around Kepler Station. Their weapons were powered up and ready. To fire, the message was clear. The hunt was over. One by one, the hunters began to retreat. They had come looking for an easy kill, But they had found something much more dangerous. They had found a friendship that was willing to fight back. As the last hunter left the lower levels, Hansol and Beko emerged from their hiding places. They were battered and exhausted, but they were alive. And more importantly, they were. "Together we did it," Hansel said, hardly believing it himself. "Yes," Beko replied. "We did it." But even as they celebrated their victory, both of them knew that the real battle was just beginning. The hunters might be gone, but the galaxy would not forget what had happened on Kepler Station. The story of the human who stood with the white fox would spread to every world and every species, and that story would change everything. The news of what happened at Kepler Station spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Cantinas and trading posts on distant worlds and busy space stations, beings talked about the human who had stood with the white fox. Some called it madness. Others called it heroic. But everyone agreed on one thing. It had never happened before. For the first time in 20 years, Beko was not hiding. He walked through the corridors of Kepler Station with his head held high. No longer the feared shadow that made others flee. Hansol walked beside him, and the two had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A true partnership between species that had nothing in common except their friendship. But not everyone was happy about this change. The message arrived on a heavily encrypted channel, sent by someone calling themselves the Coalition of Natural Order. The words were simple and direct. The abomination and his human protector must die. What they represent is a threat to the proper way of things. "Oh, we are coming." Captain Janae read the message with growing concern. "This is not like the bounty hunters," she told Hansel and Beko. "This is something much more dangerous. They are not coming for money or glory. They're coming because they believe you represent a threat to their way of life." "What kind of threat?" Hansel asked. "The threat of change," Beko answered quietly. "If a feared killer can find friendship and redemption, what does that say about all the other beings who are rejected by society? What does it say about the systems that keep certain species in power while others are pushed to the margins?" Janae nodded. "The Coalition represents the old way of thinking. They believe that some beings are naturally superior to others and that mixing between different species is dangerous. Friendship proves them wrong, and they cannot allow that." The Coalition ships arrived 3 days later. There were 50 of them, each one carrying soldiers from the most militaristic species in the galaxy. These were not individual hunters looking for profit. This was an army with a mission. Their leader was a being called Supreme Commander Thakran, a reptilian creature from one of the oldest warrior races. He had fought in a dozen wars and had never been defeated. His scales were black with age, and his eyes held the cold certainty of someone who had never doubted his own righteousness. "Citizens of Kepler Station," his voice boomed through the communication system. "We have come to cleanse this place of an infection that threatens the natural order of the galaxy. Surrender the albino abomination and his human accomplice, and the rest of you will be spared." But something unexpected happened. Instead of panic, the station's population began to organize. The merchants who had once fled from Beko now stood in the corridors, blocking the Coalition soldiers' path. The traders who had whispered about the white fox in fear now spoke about him with respect. "He protected us," said Sunya, a food vendor from the marketplace. "When the hunters came, he could have run away. Instead, he stayed and fought to keep us safe." Others nodded in agreement. They had seen the security footage of the battle in the lower levels. They had watched as Beko and Hansol worked together to defend the station. And they had realized that the stories they had been told about the white fox were wrong. "He is not a monster," said Donghayan, a mechanic who had worked on the station. "For 10 years, he is someone who was forced to become something he hated in order to survive. And when he was given the chance to be something better, he took it." The Coalition soldiers found themselves facing something they had not expected: resistance. Not from weapons or violence, but from the simple refusal of ordinary beings to step aside and let injustice happen. "This is unacceptable," Thakran growled. "The natural order must be maintained. Some beings are meant to be feared and hated. Others are meant to be pure and separate. When these boundaries are crossed, Chaos follows. But Hanzol had a different response. He activated the station's main communication system and spoke to every being within 1,000 light-years. "My name is Hanzal," he said, his voice carrying across space to ships and stations throughout the sector. "I am human, and I am speaking to you about my friend Biko. 3 months ago, I thought he was a monster. The story said he was a killer, a creature of violence and death, but I learned that stories can be wrong. On screens throughout the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. Biko is not a monster. He is someone who is rejected by his own people because he looked different. He became a fighter not because he wanted to, but because fighting was the only way he could survive. And when I offered him friendship, he showed me who he really was, an artist, a scholar, a gentle soul who had been forced to wear the mask of a killer." The words hit the Coalition soldiers like physical blows. This was not the narrative they had been told. This was not the simple story of good versus evil that they had come to enforce. "I know that some of you are afraid of change," Hansal continued. "You are afraid that if beings like Biko can find redemption, then everything you believe about the natural order might be wrong. But change is not something to fear. It is something to embrace." On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, Thakran watched as his soldiers began to look uncertain. Some of them were lowering their weapons. Others were talking quietly among themselves. The absolute certainty that had brought them here was beginning to crack. "He is using words as weapons," Thakran said to his officers. "But words cannot change reality. The albino fox is still a killer. The human is still a fool. And we are still here to restore order." But even as he spoke, Thakran could feel his own certainty wavering. The image on the screen showed Hanzel and Biko standing together in the station's main plaza. They were not hiding, they were not running. They were facing their enemies with quiet dignity and unshakable friendship. "If you want to kill us," Beko said, speaking for the first time since the Coalition arrived, "then you will have to kill us together. Because I will not let my friend face danger alone, and I know he will not abandon me." The simple statement carried more power than any weapon. Here was the feared albino fox, the creature that had been used as a symbol of everything wrong with the galaxy, standing up for someone else. Here was proof that even the most hated beings could find love and loyalty around the galaxy. Other beings began to respond. On the mining worlds, albino workers who had been treated as outcasts raised their heads with new pride. On the factory stations, beings who had been rejected because of their appearance found the courage to speak up. On the farming colonies, mixed species families who had been forced to hide their love came out into the open. "Look what you have done," Thakran said, his voice filled with rage. "You've given hope to beings who are meant to live in the shadows. You have upset the balance that has kept the galaxy stable for 1,000 years." "Maybe the galaxy needed to be upset," Hanzal replied. "Maybe a system that depends on keeping beings afraid and separated is not a system worth preserving." Coalition soldiers were wavering now. Some of them were remembering friends they had lost because of prejudice. Others were thinking about their own children, who might someday face the same hatred that Biko had endured. The simple power of friendship was proving stronger than the complex machinery of oppression. "Enough," Thakran shouted. "I will end this myself." The Supreme Commander left his ship and walked through the station's corridors, pushing past the beings who tried to block his path. He was larger and stronger than any of them, and his weapons were more advanced than anything they carried. But he was alone, and they were united. The confrontation came in the main plaza, where hundreds of beings had gathered to watch. Thakran stood at one end of the wide space, his black scales gleaming under the artificial lights. At the other end, Hanzal and Biko waited, hand in hand. "I have killed hundreds of beings," Thakran said, his voice echoing off the walls. "I have destroyed entire civilizations that threaten the natural order. I will not be stopped by one human and one diseased fox." "You are right," Hansal said calmly. "You will not be stopped by one human and one fox. You will be stopped by something much more powerful than that." "And what is that?" Thakran demanded. "The knowledge that you are wrong." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not fought with weapons or violence. It was fought with truth and compassion. As Thakran advanced on Hanzal and Biko, other beings stepped forward to join them. First came the merchants and traders, who had learned to see past Biko's appearance. Then came the workers and engineers who had watched him help repair the station. Then came the security officers who had seen him protect innocent beings during the Hunter invasion. One by one, dozens of beings formed a circle around Hansal and Biko. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages, and had different beliefs. But they were united by something simple and powerful, the understanding that friendship was stronger than fear. You cannot protect them all, Thakran said. But his voice was no longer certain. We do not need to protect them all, said Captain Janae, stepping forward to join the circle. We just need to stand with them, show you that the galaxy has changed. Thakran looked around at the faces surrounding him. He saw beings who had once been afraid showing courage. He saw species that had once been separated standing together. He saw the natural order that he had spent his life defending crumbling before his eyes, and in that moment he realized that he had already lost. The coalition forces withdrew that same day. Some of the soldiers joined the resistance movement that was spreading across the galaxy. Others returned to their homeworlds to spread the story of what they had witnessed. But all of them were changed by what they had seen. The story of the human and the white fox became legend. Children on 1,000 worlds grew up hearing about the friendship that had changed the galaxy. Artists created works celebrating the power of compassion over prejudice. And beings who had once lived in fear found the courage to step into the light. Biko and Hansal continued to work together on Kepler Station. The White Fox used his knowledge and skills to help maintain the station's systems, while Hansal taught him about human engineering techniques. They became a symbol of what was possible when beings chose to see past their differences. But more than that, they became proof that no one was beyond redemption, that friendship could bloom in the most unlikely places, that sometimes the most powerful weapon against hatred was simply the willingness to offer your hand to someone who needed it. The galaxy was a different place now, not perfect, but better. And it had all started with one human who had chosen to see a person instead of a monster. And one white fox who had remembered how to trust. In the end, they had not just saved each other. It saved the idea that change was possible, that love could conquer fear, and that friendship was the most powerful force in the universe. The albino fox no longer lurked in the shadows. He walked in the light beside the human who had taught him that he was worthy of love. And together, they had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most important revolutions begin with a simple act of kindness.